It's hard. It's really hard. So God comes to reconnect with us. And especially those who are ready. We call them the devotees. Those who are really ready to do the step and say, okay, there must be something more. There must be something more than just breathing and just try to manipulate nature and just to satisfy our senses, which are like fire. And if you put wood into the fire, what happens?
Burns.
The fire gets bigger. So they say when you try to satisfy your senses, then you want to satisfy them more. Like, what was first was bungee jumping. Yeah, you know that? Somewhere. So now there's another sport that they don't.
Wingsuits.
Huh?
Wingsuit.
Yeah.
Yeah, base jumping.
Base jumping. It's just not enough. Now we don't take anything. We like they jump just and then okay. But now they just think they have wings, especially in the Swiss Alps. I'm from Switzerland, and you hear like every few weeks, okay, another died. Just it's not enough. Our senses want more and more and more, somehow or other. So, we want to connect deeper. We want to be ready for more. So these are the devotees who say, okay, there must be something more. And so now we call this appearance, like when Krishna says, I come millennium after millennium. These are the avatars. We call them avatars. So he comes down from, we just heard it before, Radha Swami was talking about the spiritual world. There's a material world and there is a spiritual world. And so God comes down into this material realm and he looks like a human. He looks human. Sometimes he has 4 arms, so it's a little different. Then we can really see it. But Krishna appears just like us. He looked like us. And he comes just to reconnect with his devotees. He wants to reconnect. And one way to reconnect is that he comes here and he has wonderful, wonderful sports. We call it sports. Leelas. Pastimes.
Not like bungee jumping.
He has crazy stories, Krishna. Who has, there's one book, it's called the Krishna book. Has somebody read that? 1, 2. Parts. You know it. So that you can read, it's called the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's the 10th canto. It's all about Krishna from his little, from his birthday till he goes back to the spiritual world. And far out story. Far out. Like so those stories, these are sacred stories. The stories from the divine appears here. And so those stories, they're not different from chanting, from kirtan. It's actually another way of doing kirtan, to listen to those stories. And it purifies us. So Krishna, he always comes with his consort, which is Radha. And like before, Radha Swami explains, and Krishna comes as Ram and Radha comes as Sita. Or Krishna appears as Lord Shiva and Radha comes as Parvati. In this world, they appear. And they appear to have wonderful, wonderful pastimes. And those pastimes are always totally pure. There is no selfish motivation behind. And once we get into those stories, we will see it, how pure all these personalities act. And in one sense, we are also such pure beings. We are not as powerful. We are not quantitatively is a difference, but qualitatively, we are the same. We have this purity too. And so therefore, even the saints, the great devotees, who are actually already elevated in their practice, their stories is the same, is a sacred story too. And actually that's what really convinced me of this path. Like I can read about Krishna and Ram, and some stories are just over the top, and I'm like, did this really happen? But when I read the stories of great saints, and you can go back just 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, and you read from them, they are mind-blowing. They're absolutely mind-blowing. So these are sacred stories too. And they convince me actually there must be something true. Because how they selflessly act and are so happy in their life. Just people who are happy in themselves. Who can go through tremendous, difficulties to help others. Tremendous difficulties. But they're happy. They're totally happy. How sad. And so these are sacred stories too. And to hear about that is so powerful, because when we hear about it, the desire starts to be, we want to become the same. It's the same if somebody has, your neighbor has a wonderful house and he expands it, then you think, oh my God, maybe I should do it too. And you expand your house. And it says by association, we get influenced. If you hang out with drinkers, probably you will become a drinker too. If you just always hang around with thieves, you will become a thief. Yeah? If you hang out with saintly people, you will become saintly. And so, just even hear about, the same thing happens, just by hearing about. And so, so today, we want to just hear something about Radha. So we have a few here who would like to share a story of Radharani. Wallabha?
I'm a mind reader. I didn't put it in our bio.
It's just wonderful to hear from different people, because there are so many stories, beautiful stories. And so Wallabh Das, he's so absorbed in actually studying the scriptures, and he really wants to study it so that he can share it. So now it's your time to share.
I'm glad you came. I was going to slowly start leaving.
No, he was teaching again, and now he's teaching.
Otherwise, it's just selfish.
Oh.
And that's something I've studied and do study in a lineage that has historically been much more private, and like, you know, because the lineage of Keshavji's teachers and the lineage of my teachers are like kind of brothers coming up side by side from the 15th century, to like Krishna worshipping lineages. And Keshavji's lineage is sort of much more oriented kind of towards like really sharing and outer and like that, which is great. And ours has been a little bit more inward. And so I think we have, but there's always been a dialogue, and now because our mutual friend Shamdas and Radhanath Swami became very close, and you know, now, and we're also, you know, friends with, you know, Gora and Vish coming into the whole kirtan scene and everything. So there's more dialogue now, which is really great, I think. And so Keshav was exactly right, that if you study something, you know, really by sharing it is really the only way to really embody and absorb and really learn the things. So I do spend a lot of time reading sacred literature and stories of bhaktas, like Keshavji was mentioning. And I don't spend that much time talking about them and sharing their stories, so I should. So today, let's see, Radha. Oh, it's hard to, okay, which one about Radha exactly?
You can do two.
Well, the bhaktas, it's, as Keshav mentioned, bhaktas are sometimes really bewildering. All right, well, okay, here's an interesting story. I like this one, where, as Keshav mentioned, that listening is really an important practice and an effective practice just as much as sharing. It's both. So one time there were these two bhaktas, two devotees, who got into the katha, the stories of Krishna particularly, and they started spending more and more time, you know, talking together and sharing these stories. One of them would kind of speak more, and the other one was just kind of a quieter type. He would listen. One time they it was like too distracting at home. TV was on, kids running around. They go out into a field and to a cave, and they sit down and have satsang there. Kind of like we are here, you know, kind of set aside from all the hubbub. And they sit there eating. Their wives are like, wait, where did our husbands go? They were kind of neighbors. So they went out, you know, they haven't come back to eat, so they go out, they're looking for them, you know, to bring them some lunch or something. They can't find them because they went into a cave, and they were sitting there having satsang, talking about the great bhaktas that they knew, and about, you know, Krishna's sports, his bungee jumping, his polo. Krishna does a lot of crazy sports with sticks and balls and climbing up on each other's shoulders and racing and stuff. All kinds of crazy games.
So sorry, it's okay to do bungee jumping. I didn't understand that. Okay.
So they died. They were sitting there having satsang. They were so absorbed in the satsang because, yeah, I mean, when these things are so nectar filled. I mean, you know, when I sit here and try to recall from my very limited bhav, basically, you know, it's not so absorbing that you're going to forget to go back to the rest of the program. But these guys were so, you know, so steeped in this thing. You know, it's like, you know, Kesha was mentioning at a time way back when we could just hear something and then remember it. Well, even at this time when these great bhaktas of our traditions were hanging out like 400 or 500 years ago, then also it was a different time, you know, much less distractions. So yeah, they got so absorbed. So I mean, when you read the literature, it talks about how they're like drenched in nectar, like soaked. It's also said like for this phenomenon too of if you have a wet paper towel, a bounty paper towel, and a dry one, you put them next to each other, the dry one becomes wet, it gets soaked. So that's why having that contact with each other, with other people who are into Bhakti and Bhav and Kirtan, it rubs off in this great way. But this time they went too far and they got so absorbed in the thing, they just talked and talked and talked, and then they just keeled over and died. And so their wives went looking for them, and they again, finally they found these two piles of bones sitting next to each other. And they were like, well, all right, that's Radhe. But then they thought, in India it's very important to cremate remains. So they said, well, all right, so when we got to cremate our husbands, but wait, which one's your husband and which one's mine? So then they saw that one of the piles of bones, the bones were really like more dense, and the other pile of bones were much more porous. So the wife said, well, my husband was the Vakta, or the like speaker. So his bones were much more dense, and your husband was the Shrota, or the listener. So he was like absorbing, so it made his bones all like porous. So really, like you said, really like bewildering, far out, like bizarre stories. But I guess the idea is just these crazy stories to really just over the top show the importance of what we're doing here, like spending time together, talking, thinking, listening about spiritual subjects, because there's a lot of things in the supermarket and everywhere else to focus on. I'm privileged to know you guys and to know this Bhakti literature, and I do translate some of it, and our friend Shamdas translated it, and we turned those into English books for you all to enjoy. So if you like stories, that one was odd. It just kind of came to mind.
Especially when the wives went, Radhe.
So I hope we don't go as deep here right now.
But so there's these books like that. If you look at the shamdasfoundation.com, this is one way to get some books on these kind of satsang subjects.
Nice, thank you.
Yes?
Is it a long question?
So you asked the question of, do we know any stories of Radha? And I realized, do we know any stories of Radha? And I realized that I don't. That I know a lot of stories of Krishna, and as a female devotee, I actually identify with the Krishna's role in the stories. Like Krishna has this sort of young man who's the beloved of the gopis. Okay, he's Govinda. He becomes a fully mature man when he becomes the lover of Radha Ramana Hari. So when stepping into full love, he becomes a mature adult. But when you ask the question, I'm actually shocked that I don't have any knowledge of who this woman actually was, that he was so beloved by, and that I've sort of misidentified on a gender basis. So anyway, I would love to hear actually what is her character, and how does she meet this powerful being?
Can I say one thing real quick on that? The soul, what's interesting about that is that as individual souls, we're actually more supposed to be in that, like female, even guys, like all as individual souls, we're like that. We're actually more like the Radha, the Gopi devotee who's trying to reconnect with God. So it is important.
We are all actually Prakriti, which is, we're all female actually. All of us. The soul by nature is female. Even if you appear as male, you're female. It's this deep devotion which is in all of us. Like it said, Bhagavan is Ishvara. He's the controller. we actually don't have to control. It's already controlled. So we don't have to do it. We are the Prakriti. Like the material nature is also called Prakriti. And material nature just also serves God. And in the same way, we are female by nature. We have this character. But we want to hear. So what you're saying, yes, Radha she's very shy. She's never putting herself in front. She always puts others in front. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the one who, when they were talking, they couldn't take the word Radha in their mouth, because the same would happen what he just said about these two husbands. They would not have died maybe, but they would have fallen into ecstasy and the conversation couldn't have gone on. So therefore Radharani is so intimate, or confidential, that it's not openly really talked. And so therefore it's not so much a stir, in one sense. Radha really, we have to realize it in our heart. And it's revealed in our heart. We can hear it, but we have to realize it in our heart, and it gets revealed. But still we want to hear a story, and Kamani wanted to tell us a story about Radha.
You said you have nothing else to say.
You said
Sing us a story. Sing. Sing us a story.
Sing a story. Kirtan.
I wanted to sing, actually.
Let's
Yes.
say it's kirtan.
No
No entiende.
I'm running out of batteries. Sorry, gotta go. Love you. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.